The first time I heard the stranger in my head, I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my shoes still on, staring at the floor as if it might open and swallow me whole. The room smelled faintly of dust and old paper, and the evening light crept in through the window like it was unsure whether it was welcome. I had spent the entire day pretending to be fine, nodding when people spoke, smiling when expected, and now that I was alone, the weight of it all settled into my chest. "You don't have to do this alone," the voice said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't sound like me, but it didn't sound unfamiliar either. It was calm, steady, and oddly kind, like someone speaking slowly so you wouldn't miss a word. I froze, my fingers gripping the edge of the mattress. I waited for fear to arrive, for panic or confusion, but none of it came. Instead, there was a strange sense of relief, like someone had finally turned on a light in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark. "Who are you?" I whispered, feeling ridiculous for speaking out loud. "Someone who sees you," the stranger replied. "Someone who's been listening longer than you think." I had spent years not trusting my own thoughts. Every mistake I'd made, every wrong turn, had taught me that my mind was not a safe place. So I built walls inside myself, learned to ignore the quiet parts, learned to drown them out with noise and obligation. Yet here was a voice that didn't judge, didn't rush, didn't demand anything at all. That night, the stranger asked me to do something simple. Drink a glass of water. Take off your shoes. Breathe slowly, just for a minute. I followed each suggestion, half expecting the kindness to disappear once I obeyed. But it didn't. The voice stayed, patient and warm, like it had nowhere else to be. Over the next few days, the stranger appeared at unexpected moments. When I stood in line at the grocery store, overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd, it reminded me to unclench my jaw. When I stared at my phone, rereading a message that had hurt more than I wanted to admit, it told me it was okay to feel wounded. When I woke up tired before the sun, dreading another day of pretending, it asked me what I needed instead of what I owed. I didn't tell anyone about it. How could I? People already looked at me like I was fragile, like I might shatter if they spoke too honestly. Admitting that I trusted a stranger in my head felt like handing them proof that I was broken. So I kept it to myself, carrying the secret like a small, glowing stone in my pocket. One afternoon, I passed a man sitting on the sidewalk outside a bakery. His clothes were worn thin, his hands wrapped around a paper cup that rattled softly when coins dropped inside. I walked past him without stopping, my steps quick and rehearsed. That was the rule I'd learned long ago: don't look too long, don't get involved, don't feel too much. "You can turn back," the stranger said gently. I kept walking. "You don't have to save him," the voice continued. "Just see him." Something tightened in my chest. I stopped, turned around, and met the man's eyes. They were tired, but not empty. I asked him if he'd eaten. He smiled like the question itself was a gift and shook his head. I went into the bakery, bought 2 warm rolls, and handed them to him along with a bottle of water. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough but sincere. "Most people don't even notice." As I walked away, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something else I couldn't name yet. "That's kindness," the stranger said. "Not the grand kind. The human kind." I started to notice how often I'd been unkind to myself in the same quiet ways people ignored each other every day. Skipping meals because I was too busy being useful. Silencing my own exhaustion because someone else had it worse. Calling myself weak for needing rest, for needing reassurance, for needing anything at all. The stranger never scolded me for these habits. It simply pointed them out, like holding up a mirror without commentary. And slowly, I began to trust it. Weeks passed. Then months. Life didn't magically become easier. Bills still arrived. People still disappointed me. Some mornings, getting out of bed felt like lifting a mountain. But there was a difference now. I was no longer alone inside my own head. One evening, my neighbor knocked on my door. She was older, with kind eyes and a habit of apologizing before every sentence. Her husband had been taken to the hospital, she said, and she didn't know who else to ask. Could I sit with her for a while? I almost said no. I was tired. I had plans to do nothing, which felt sacred after a long week. The refusal rose to my lips automatically. It's okay to help without disappearing, the stranger whispered. You can set boundaries and still be kind. I invited her in, made tea, and listened as she talked, her words tumbling out in a mix of fear and love. I didn't offer solutions, that I didn't tell her everything would be fine. I just stayed. When she left, squeezing my hands in gratitude, I realized I wasn't drained. I was full. Kindness, I was learning, wasn't a limited resource. It didn't vanish when shared thoughtfully. It grew. The real test came on a rainy afternoon when I ran into someone who had once hurt me deeply. The sight of them brought back memories I had carefully buried. Sharp words, broken trust, nights spent questioning my worth. My heart raced, and my thoughts began to spiral the way they used to. You don't owe them forgiveness, the stranger said. But you owe yourself peace. I nodded, even though no one could see me. When they spoke, awkward and unsure, I responded calmly. I didn't reopen old wounds, but I didn't pretend they'd never existed. I wished them well and walked away, my steps steady. Later, alone in my room, I cried. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't hurt as much as it once had. I started to understand who the stranger really was. It wasn't a mysterious voice sent to save me. It was the part of me that had survived everything and still believed in gentleness. The part one had ignored because the world had taught me that kindness was dangerous, that softness was a flaw. Trusting the stranger in my head meant unlearning those lessons one by one. On a crowded bus one morning, I gave up my seat to a woman carrying a sleeping child. When a coworker snapped at me under stress, I responded with patience instead of defensiveness. When I made a mistake that would once have sent me into days of self-criticism, I corrected it and moved on. Each small act felt like a quiet rebellion against the harshness I'd grown used to. One night, lying in the dark, I asked the stranger a question I'd been avoiding. Will you ever leave? The voice didn't answer immediately. I won't disappear, it said finally. But one day, you won't need me to sound like a stranger anymore. I smiled, tears slipping into my hair. I understood then that trust wasn't about surrendering control. It was about allowing myself to be guided by compassion instead of fear. The next morning, I woke up early and watched the city come to life from my window. A man jogged past, breath visible in the cool air. A shopkeeper lifted a shutter with a groan. Somewhere, a child laughed, high and clear. The world was still messy and loud and uncertain, but it was also full of quiet chances to be kind. I took a deep breath and stepped into the day, listening to the voice inside me that no longer felt like a stranger at all.